Tonight we're going further back than we have ever gone before. Not medieval castles, not Viking longhouses, all the way back to the Stone Age, to the world before writing, before farming, before anything you would recognize as civilization, when all odds were against you, and it was survival of the fittest. If you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel is built for nights exactly like this one. And before we start, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. Get comfortable, pull the covers up, let's start. Forget everything. Not metaphorically, literally. Take everything you know about the world, the roads, the buildings, the fields, the cities, the supermarkets, the hospitals, the heating systems, and the water supply, and the 1,000 invisible infrastructures that keep you alive without your noticing, and remove it. All of it. Gone. What is left? A landscape. Trees mostly. Dense, old-growth forest covering most of Europe in a canopy so thick that in summer the sun barely reaches the ground. Rivers running clear and cold and full of fish. Grasslands in the open areas where the forest retreats. Mountains. Marshes. The occasional open plain where large animals move in groups that a modern eye would struggle to process as real. Herds of aurochs, the wild ancestors of cattle, each animal the size of a small car and significantly less interested in your well-being than a modern cow. The air smells different, not better or worse, different. No exhaust, no cooking smells carried from a neighbor's window, no cut grass or treated timber. The smell of the Paleolithic world is the smell of water and earth and living things, and the specific cold clarity of air that has never been anything other than air. It is approximately 30,000 years ago. You are somewhere in what will one day be called Europe, though that name does not exist yet, and will not exist for another 29,000 years. The Neanderthals have recently gone, recently in geological terms, which means within the last few thousand years, and Homo sapiens, your direct ancestors, are the dominant human species on the planet. You are about to become one of them, not in a comfortable way. The honest answer to the question this video is asking, why wouldn't you last a day, is that the reasons are so numerous and so fundamental that the more accurate question is, which one gets you first? Let's find out. But first, you need to understand what you are walking into, what the world was, what it required, and what the people who lived in it had that you do not. The answer to that last one is going to be uncomfortable. Let's begin. Before you take a single step in the Paleolithic world, your body is already working against you. Not because there is anything wrong with it. Your body is a remarkable piece of biological engineering that has been refined by millions of years of evolution to survive in a wide range of environments. The problem is not your body's capability. The problem is what your body has been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years of your life, and what it has not been doing. You have been sitting. This is not a judgment. This is a description of the modern human condition. You sit to eat, to work, to travel, to be entertained, to recover from sitting. The average modern person in the developed world sits for approximately 10 hours a day. Their muscles have adapted to this. Their cardiovascular system has adapted to this. Their feet, which were designed for a lifetime of barefoot walking across varied terrain, have been in shoes since infancy and have developed accordingly. The prehistoric human you are attempting to replace walked between 10 and 20 miles a day, not as exercise. As the minimum requirement of existence, hunting requires covering ground. Foraging requires covering ground. Following the seasonal movement of food sources requires covering ground. This walking was not on flat paved surfaces with cushioned shoes. It was across the actual surface of the actual earth, which is uneven and unpredictable and frequently wet and sometimes very steep. Your feet would blister within the first hour, not because prehistoric feet were tougher, though they were, but because the soles of your feet have never been required to do this, and the skin on them is as unprepared for it as the skin on your palm would be if you were suddenly asked to spend the day gripping rough stone. Beyond the feet, your back, your core muscles, your grip strength, the muscles of your legs above the knee, that running on flat surfaces never fully develops, the specific muscle groups involved in climbing, in carrying heavy loads over long distances, in the physical negotiation of terrain that has never been managed or maintained. All of these are weaker than they should be. Not dramatically. You are not helpless, but weaker than the baseline that Paleolithic life requires, and the deficit will make itself known within the first day in ways that are first uncomfortable and then serious. This is before we talk about the cold, which we are about to. It is cold, not the cold of a January morning when you forgot to bring your coat and the walk from the car to the office takes 3 minutes. The cold of the Paleolithic world, particularly if this is winter or shoulder season, is the cold of a world without heating, without walls, without insulation, without the concept of a warm room to return to. The average temperature of Ice Age Europe fluctuated significantly, but even in the warmer periods of 30,000 years ago, the winters were harder than what most modern people in temperate climates experience. The cold was not a daily inconvenience to be managed and then escaped. It was a constant, pervasive, physical reality that shaped every decision you made, every hour of every day. Your clothing is the first casualty of this reality. What are you wearing? Whatever answer you give to this question, the answer is wrong for this environment. The synthetic fabrics of modern clothing are extraordinary at many things. They are lightweight, they are durable, they come in a vast range of styles, but they were not designed for a world where getting wet might kill you and where maintaining core body temperature is not a comfort consideration, but a survival one. Prehistoric clothing was made from animal hide and fur, processed by a method called brain tanning, a technique that uses the animal's own brain to cure the skin into a soft, flexible, water-resistant material. This process takes considerable skill and considerable time, and produces clothing that is genuinely superior to most modern materials for the specific conditions of outdoor survival in cold environments. A properly brain-tanned hide is warm, waterproof, breathable, and will last for years. You do not know how to brain tan a hide. You do not have a hide. You do not have the tools to produce a hide, and even if you did, acquiring one requires first killing an animal large enough to be worth the effort, which is a separate problem we will get to. For now, you are in the Paleolithic world in whatever you were wearing when you got here, and the cold is doing what cold does, which is to find every gap in your covering and work at it. Within a few hours of exposure in cold, wet conditions, and the Paleolithic world was frequently both, the first symptoms of hypothermia begin. Shivering, which is the body's involuntary attempt to generate heat through muscle movement. Confusion, which comes later and is the sign that the body is beginning to ration its resources. Poor coordination, poor judgment, the paradoxical undressing that accompanies severe hypothermia, in which the affected person removes their clothing because the peripheral vasodilation that precedes death produces a sensation of warmth. None of this needs to happen to you, but you need fire, and we need to talk about fire. You need fire. This is not optional. In the Paleolithic world, fire is the boundary between surviving the night and not surviving the night, between eating cooked food and eating raw food, between having light and being in darkness so complete that the modern eye has no reference point for it. You need fire, and you do not know how to make it. This statement requires some qualification. You may know the theory. You have probably seen demonstrations, read articles, watched videos in which someone who has practiced for months produces fire from friction in a matter of minutes. You understand that the bow drill method involves a spindle rotating rapidly in a hearthboard, generating friction that produces an ember, which is then transferred to a tinder bundle and blown into flame. Knowing this and being able to do it are not the same thing. Making fire with a bow drill on the first attempt without prior practice, in cold conditions with your hands already compromised by cold and your arms already tired from a day of walking, this is not something you are going to accomplish. The friction method requires specific wood combinations, a spindle shaped correctly, a hearthboard prepared correctly, a tinder bundle of the right material prepared to exactly the right consistency, and a technique that feels intuitive only after weeks of practice during which you failed repeatedly. The flint and steel method, which is actually the older method, striking flint against iron pyrite to produce a spark that is caught in tinder, requires finding the right materials, shaping the flint correctly, and catching the spark in tinder that is dry and prepared correctly. Again, not impossible in theory. In practice, in conditions that are not ideal, on the first try, with cold hands, very nearly impossible. A Paleolithic human carried their fire. They maintained a coal or an ember through a carefully constructed ember carrier, a shell, a folded piece of bark, a clay vessel, and they kept it alive across days and distances because starting fire from scratch was something you did only when you had no choice. The skill of maintaining fire was more valuable than the skill of starting it. You have neither skill, the night is coming, and you have no fire. You are thirsty. This surprised you. You expected to be cold first, hungry second, but the body's demand for water is relentless and indifferent to the other crises competing for your attention, and you have been walking for several hours on a dry mouth, and the thirst is now the loudest thing in your body. There is water everywhere. This is the maddening thing about the Paleolithic world. It is full of rivers and streams and lakes and rain and morning dew and standing water in low ground. Water is not scarce. Safe water is another matter. The germ theory of disease, the understanding that microscopic organisms in water cause illness, is approximately 29,970 years in the future. You know it exists. The prehistoric humans around you do not. They drink from rivers and streams, and they get sick sometimes in ways they cannot explain. and they die from it sometimes in ways they also cannot explain. The water looks clean. It is clear and cold and running, and it comes from sources that have not been touched by industrial agriculture or sewage systems. It is still not safe to drink without boiling. The beaver living upstream has intestinal parasites. Those parasites, Giardia specifically, are shed in the beaver's feces into the water. The water carries them downstream. The water looks beautiful and clear and cold, and it is full of Giardia. Giardia takes 1 to 3 weeks to produce symptoms, so the immediate problem, the thirst, the dry mouth, the headache building behind your eyes, demands that you drink something now, and the water in front of you is the only option. You drink. You will feel the consequences of this decision in approximately 10 days in the form of intestinal symptoms that would be unpleasant in a modern setting with access to rehydration and medical support, and are considerably more serious in a setting where none of those things exist. For now, the thirst is addressed, the headache begins to ease. You move on, but the clock has started. You are hungry. And you manage it as you manage it in the modern world, which is to think about what you want and this is where the prehistoric world declines to cooperate. Go and get it. What do you know how to find? If you are lucky enough to be doing this in summer or autumn, the situation is somewhat less dire than it would be in winter. There are berries. You know what a blackberry looks like. You know what a raspberry looks like. And in the right season, the hedgerows and forest edges are full of them. This is genuine food and genuine calories, and you should eat everything you can find, because the problem with berries is not their availability, but their caloric density, which is low. You can eat berries for an hour and feel full for 20 minutes. You know what an apple looks like, which is useful, except that the wild apple of the Paleolithic world, the crab apple, is small and extremely sour and only edible at certain times of the year, and the tree is indistinguishable from a dozen other trees until it is fruiting. Do you know what an edible mushroom looks like? Not in the general sense. You know, mushrooms are edible, but specifically. Can you tell a chanterelle from a death cap with enough confidence to stake your life on it? Because that is the confidence level required. The death cap is responsible for the majority of fatal mushroom poisonings in the modern world, and it looks, to the untrained eye, reassuringly like several edible species. The Paleolithic forager had a knowledge base built over a lifetime, supplemented by the collective knowledge of a group, refined by cultural transmission across generations. They knew which plants were edible and which were not, which mushrooms, which roots, which seeds, which parts of which animals. This knowledge was not written down. It was embodied, held in the body's memory and the community's shared practice. You have access to a fraction of this knowledge. The fraction is not sufficient for a day. By evening, you have eaten some berries, avoided several mushrooms you were not confident about, and consumed approximately 400 calories. You need somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 calories a day to sustain the physical activity you have been doing. The deficit is serious, and you have not eaten any protein. You need protein. This is not a dietary preference. In the conditions you are in, cold, active, calorie deficient, your body's need for protein is urgent and specific. The berries you ate were carbohydrates. The roots you dug were carbohydrates. Your body needs the amino acids that only animal or leguminous plant sources can provide in quantity, and the legumes of the Paleolithic world are not yet cultivated. and finding them wild requires knowledge you do not have. You need to hunt. What do you have to hunt with? You have your hands. You have whatever rocks are available in the immediate environment. You do not have a bow. The bow is not invented yet in this period, or is at the absolute beginning of its development, depending on which 30,000 years ago you have landed in. You do not have a spear thrower, or you have never used one. You have a stone hand axe if you have spent the last 3 hours learning to knap flint, which requires its own skill set, or you have nothing sharper than a pointed stick. The animals around you are not domesticated. They are wild, fully wild, with the survival instincts of wild animals that have never been bred for tameness. The red deer you can see at the edge of the clearing, magnificent, large, full of calories, detected your presence before you detected it. It knew you were there from your smell. Carried on the wind you failed to account for, and it has been watching you with the calm attention of an animal that is not afraid of you, because it has correctly assessed that you are not a threat. It is right. You are not a threat. The Paleolithic hunters who brought down large game were highly skilled, operating in coordinated groups using terrain and animal behavior knowledge accumulated over years. A successful hunt was not a daily occurrence. It was an event, planned and executed by experts, and even they failed regularly. The plant foods that women primarily gathered provided the caloric majority of the group's diet. The meat was crucial and celebrated precisely because it was difficult. You are not a Paleolithic hunting group. You are one cold, hungry, poorly equipped modern person in a forest, watching a deer watch you. The deer loses interest and walks away. You eat more berries. Your feet are telling you about themselves. They have been telling you about themselves since approximately the second hour, but you were managing the cold and the thirst and the food situation, and you were not fully listening. Now, in the late afternoon, with the light beginning to fail and the distance between where you are and where you need to be, which is somewhere sheltered, somewhere warm, somewhere safe, becoming an urgent consideration, your feet have escalated from telling to demanding. The blisters are real, multiple on both feet, the heel primarily, where your shoe has been rubbing across the same patch of skin for hours with the relentless efficiency that only footwear designed for a different terrain can achieve. The ball of the foot also, where the repeated impact of walking on uneven ground has stressed the skin in a way that flat surfaces never do. A blister in the modern world is an annoyance. A blister in the Paleolithic world is a vector for infection. The ground you are walking on is the same ground that every animal in this area has also walked on, and those animals have left behind the full bacterial richness of their presence. The skin of the blister, thin and compromised, is not a reliable barrier against this. You have no antiseptic. You have no bandages. You have no clean water to wash the wound with, and no alcohol to sterilize it. You have the option of treating the blister with what the Paleolithic world provides, which is honey, if you can find it, which requires finding a bee colony and accessing it without being stung into a medical emergency, which is another problem, or certain plant compounds with antimicrobial properties, which requires knowing which plants and how to prepare them. You leave the blisters alone. They will become infected. This will happen slowly, over days rather than hours. But the infection, untreated, will travel up the lymphatic system with the patient efficiency of bacterial infection everywhere, and the consequences in a world without antibiotics are not theoretical. For now, the feet hurt and you are limping slightly. and the light is failing, and you need shelter. The shelter problem is about to become very immediate. The light is going. You have perhaps an hour before the world becomes dark in a way that the modern eye has no reference for. There are no streetlights, no lit windows, no ambient glow of a distant city on the horizon. When the sun goes down in the Paleolithic world, the darkness is total and immediate, and navigating in it without fire is not something you are equipped to do. You need shelter now. What does shelter look like in the Paleolithic world? Not in this period, the cave of popular imagination. Caves were used, certainly, but only where they were available, and only by groups with the knowledge and equipment to use them safely. Most prehistoric people most of the time slept in constructed shelters, simple frames of branches and saplings covered with hides or bark or layered vegetation, positioned to take advantage of natural windbreaks. You can build something like this. The theory is not complicated. Lean branches against a central support, layer them thickly, add insulating material on top, make the interior small enough that body heat accumulates. A debris hut, in modern survival terminology. The principle is sound, the execution in the failing light, with hands compromised by cold and feet compromised by blisters, in an unfamiliar landscape where you are not certain which materials are available and where the light is dropping by the minute, is considerably more difficult than the theory. You build something. It is not good. The branches are green and heavy, and the structure has the structural integrity of a suggestion rather than a shelter. The coverage is incomplete. There are gaps through which the night wind will find you. The interior is damp because you have used green vegetation that is releasing moisture as it settles. It is better than nothing. You crawl inside. The darkness arrives. You are inside a pile of sticks in the Paleolithic forest, and the temperature is dropping, and you do not have fire, and your feet hurt, and you are significantly hungrier than you have been at any point in your modern life, and the night sounds have started. The darkness is complete. You have experienced darkness before. Power outages, rural roads, the particular dark of a room with blackout curtains. But you have never experienced the Paleolithic dark, because the Paleolithic dark has no edges, no suggestion of light anywhere, no neighbor's window, no car headlights on a distant road, no moon if the cloud cover is solid, no ambient light of any kind. When you hold your hand 6 inches in front of your face, you cannot see it. This is not metaphor. This is the actual situation. Your hand is 6 inches from your face and it is invisible because there is not enough light reaching your eyes to resolve it. Your eyes are doing what eyes do in total darkness, which is to search and find nothing, and search again. And the searching produces the particular visual noise of photoreceptors trying to fire with insufficient stimulus, the faint moving patterns at the edge of vision that are not things, but the visual system's response to having nothing to report. Your hearing has become very acute. This is partly genuine. The brain, deprived of visual input, redirects attention to the other senses, and partly the particular heightened awareness of a person who is alone in an unfamiliar environment in the dark and whose nervous system is running on the ancient software of an animal that is not at the top of the food chain. You are not, in the Paleolithic world, at the top of the food chain. This is the part of the prehistoric reality that the modern imagination most consistently gets wrong. The romantic vision of the prehistoric human as the apex predator of the ancient world is not accurate. You were prey, not exclusively. You were also a predator, a highly effective one as a group, but individually, alone, at night in the forest, without fire. You were a viable target for several species that shared this landscape with you. Cave lions were real. They were larger than modern lions. They existed in Paleolithic Europe. Cave hyenas were real. They were larger than modern spotted hyenas. Bears were real and are real, and a bear in the Paleolithic world has never learned to be cautious around humans. None of these things are necessarily in your immediate vicinity. The probability of a direct encounter on any given night is not high, but the probability is not zero, and you do not have fire, which is the primary deterrent that prehistoric humans used against large predators, and you are alone, which removes the group vigilance that was the secondary deterrent, and you are in a leaky pile of sticks that a determined animal could disassemble without breaking a sweat. You lie very still. The darkness holds everything. You listen. Here is the most important thing you are missing, and it is not fire or tools or knowledge, though it is all of those things too. It is the group. No Paleolithic human lived the way you are trying to live tonight. The solitary prehistoric person, alone, without community, without the group that was the fundamental unit of human survival for the vast majority of our species' existence, was not a survivalist. They were dead. The timeline varied. The outcome did not. The group was everything. Not metaphorically, structurally, biologically, practically everything. The group maintained fire so that no individual had to start it from scratch. The group shared food so that a bad hunting day for one person was not a starvation event. The group maintained knowledge. Who knew which plants, who knew which terrain, who knew the seasonal movements of the herds. In a distributed system where the failure of any single individual did not mean the loss of that knowledge. The group provided physical defense in a landscape full of things that could kill a lone human. The group provided childcare, elder care, the nursing of the sick, the management of injury. The band, the basic unit of prehistoric human social organization, was typically between 25 and 50 people, small enough to be mobile following the seasonal availability of food, large enough to maintain the minimum necessary diversity of skills and knowledge, bound together not only by practical necessity, but by the deep social bonds that human biology is specifically designed to form and maintain, because those bonds were survival. You did not wake up this morning in a group. You are alone in a pile of sticks in the Paleolithic forest, and every difficulty you have encountered today is more difficult because you are alone, and every difficulty you will encounter tomorrow will be more difficult, and the difficulties accumulate rather than resolve because you have no one to share them with. The Paleolithic human who was cast out of their group, exiled, separated, lost, faced a specific and well understood fate. You are experiencing the beginning of it. The darkness presses in. You pull your knees toward your chest. The night is very long. You did not appreciate how long the night was until now, when you have nothing to do but endure it. In the modern world, the night is managed. You sleep through it, or you manage it with light and heating and entertainment. In the Paleolithic world, without fire, the night is simply the time between sunset and sunrise, during which you are cold and uncomfortable and alert to sounds that may or may not indicate something approaching, and there is nothing to be done except wait. You sleep in intervals, not deeply, not the restorative sleep of a warm bed in a safe room, the light, fitful sleep of a cold, uncomfortable person who is waking every 20 minutes to check the sounds of the forest and who cannot fully surrender to unconsciousness because the unconsciousness feels too dangerous. Your core temperature has dropped, not to the dangerous level. You are cold and miserable, but not hypothermic, which means the leaf litter you piled inside your debris hut is doing some work and your body is generating some heat, and the worst case scenario of this particular night is not in play. Your feet have swollen inside your shoes. The blisters are a committed presence. The hunger is significant now, not the manageable hunger of having skipped lunch, but the deeper, more insistent hunger of a body that has not received adequate calories and is beginning to inquire with some urgency about when this situation is going to be addressed. Around 3 in the morning, the cold reaches its maximum and you are shivering consistently. The body doing what bodies do when heat generation is insufficient. The involuntary muscle contractions that produce a little warmth at the cost of energy that you cannot afford to spend. You pull your knees tighter. You press your face into your arms. You make yourself as small as possible in the way that cold people have always made themselves small. Something moves in the forest. You freeze. The sound continues for a moment. A movement in the undergrowth. Something large, and then stops. Then nothing. You breathe. The night continues, 1 hour at a time. The light comes, not dramatically, not the glorious sunrise of the imagination. Grey. The specific grey of a Paleolithic morning filtering through cloud cover and canopy, arriving so gradually that the exact moment of its arrival is impossible to identify. But it comes, and the darkness retreats, and the forest resolves out of the formless black into shapes, and then into trees and undergrowth, and the particular beauty of a world that has had no human intervention and is simply itself in all its tangled, indifferent glory. You survived the night. This is not a small thing. Take a moment with it. In the conditions you were in, no fire, inadequate shelter, inadequate food, cold, alone. Surviving the night is a genuine achievement. Your ancestors did this. Not once, not as a survival challenge, but every night of their lives. And they did it in groups with knowledge and tools and fire, which made it something entirely different. But the basic biology of surviving cold without modern infrastructure is in your body somewhere, inherited from the people who did it successfully enough to pass it down to you. The problem is that surviving the night has not addressed any of the day's problems. You are colder than when you lay down because the body's core temperature drops in sleep and the night was long. You are hungrier than when you lay down because you have now gone approximately 18 hours without adequate food and the body's glycogen stores are significantly depleted. Your feet are worse. Your hands are stiff with cold. The blister on your right heel has definitely developed a quality overnight that was not there yesterday, and the day ahead has all of yesterday's problems in it, now compounded by the effects of yesterday. The deficit compounds. This is the fundamental math of Paleolithic survival that the solo day tripper does not account for. Each inadequately managed day makes the next day harder. Your food deficit today makes you weaker tomorrow, which makes foraging less effective, which increases the food deficit, which makes you weaker still. Your blister today becomes an infected wound in a week. Your cold exposure today lowers your immune function, making you more susceptible to the bacterial load in the water you drank yesterday. The Paleolithic human in a functioning group managed these deficits collectively. Injuries were covered for. The sick were fed by the healthy. Knowledge prevented the initial errors. You have made most of the initial errors already. Stand up. The day is beginning. You are going to die of something small. Not the cave lion, which did not appear last night and is statistically unlikely to be the mechanism. Not starvation, though starvation is a real risk over a longer timeline. Not even the cold, which is manageable given sufficient motivation and the fortunate absence of rain. You are going to die of infection. This is the honest answer to what actually killed prehistoric people at the rates that kept life expectancy short. Not the dramatic megafauna, not the spectacular violence of tribal conflict, though that was real. The quiet, pervasive, invisible threat of bacterial infection in a world without antibiotics. The blister on your heel, the cut you got on your hand when you were gathering firewood and did not notice until later, the water you drank that tasted clean, the meat you eventually managed to acquire and cooked insufficiently because your fire, if you managed to start one, was not hot enough for long enough. Any one of these is a potential entry point for bacterial infection, and in the Paleolithic world, bacterial infection that gets past the body's initial immune response is very likely to be fatal. The body has impressive resources. It will fight. It will run a fever. The elevated temperature that makes bacterial reproduction more difficult. It will direct immune resources to the site of infection. It will produce the inflammatory response that is the immune system's first-line defense. These responses are effective up to a point. Past that point, without the specific molecular intervention that antibiotics provide, the options narrow dramatically. The prehistoric human who survived infection survived because their immune system was sufficient, because the bacterial load was manageable, because the wound was small and clean, because they were young and well-nourished, and their immune system was at full strength. Many did not survive for one or more of the opposite reasons. You are not well-nourished today. You were yesterday by modern standards, but the deficit is accumulating and immune function follows nutritional status with a lag. The blister is getting warmer. You notice this. You move on because there is nothing else to do. Stop for a moment and be honest about something. The Paleolithic human was not surviving despite being primitive. They were surviving because of knowledge and skill that took a lifetime to acquire and a community to maintain. Knowledge that is so specialized and so embodied that it cannot be conveyed by reading about it or watching videos about it or even spending a week in a survival course. The knowledge of which plants are edible in which season, in which part of the landscape, and how to prepare them to maximize their nutritional value and minimize their toxicity. This is not information you acquire in a day. It is the accumulated observation of years, refined by the collective experience of a group, cross-checked against the knowledge of elders who have been observing for decades longer. The knowledge of animal behavior, where the deer go at dusk, where the fish are in different seasons, which direction the animals move when the weather changes, the signs in the landscape that indicate recent animal presence. This is not intuition. It is pattern recognition built on thousands of hours of observation, the same pattern recognition that produces expertise in any field, applied to a subject that the modern world has almost entirely deconstructed from direct experience. The knowledge of terrain, the drainage patterns that indicate water, the rock formations that indicate shelter, the plant communities that indicate soil type, and therefore what else might be found nearby. This is the reading of a landscape that takes years to become fluent in. The knowledge of fire, not just how to start it, but how to maintain it, how to transport it, how to use different woods for different purposes, how to build a fire in wet conditions, how to bank a fire so it survives the night. This is practical knowledge, procedural knowledge, the kind that lives in the hands rather than the head. You have none of this knowledge at the level required. The Paleolithic human was not dumber than you. They were smarter than you in the specific skills that their world required, in the same way that you are more capable in the specific skills that your world requires. Intelligence is not the variable. Knowledge is. And their knowledge was tuned to an environment that your education did not prepare you for. This is not a criticism of you. It is an explanation of why you are sitting on a rock in the Paleolithic forest, cold and hungry and alone, while your ancestors were managing this environment with a sophistication that modern civilization took thousands of years to partially replicate. They knew this world. You do not. You find a good piece of flint. You recognize it as flint. The dark, glassy stone that fractures in predictable ways and produces sharp edges. The stone that was the foundation of prehistoric technology for hundreds of thousands of years. You know, from what you have read and watched, that this stone can be worked into tools. A hand axe, a scraper, a knife, a spearhead. You pick it up and you try. Knapping flint is one of those skills that looks simple in demonstration and reveals its complexity immediately on the first attempt. The stone is struck at a specific angle with a specific amount of force using a specific material. Hard stone for removing large flakes, softer antler or bone for the pressure flaking that refines an edge, and the result, when done correctly, is a piece of stone with an edge sharp enough to shave with. Your first strike removes a flake in approximately the right direction. Your second strike removes a large chunk from the wrong part of the stone, ruining its shape. Your third strike causes the stone to fracture entirely along a natural fault that you did not see. You try with another piece of flint. This goes better. You have a rough, thick piece of stone with one edge that is moderately sharp, sharp enough to cut through green wood with effort, not sharp enough to be useful for anything that requires precision. This is your tool. In the Paleolithic world, tool quality was the difference between adequate and insufficient in almost every practical task. A properly knapped blade cuts through hide quickly and cleanly. A poorly knapped edge tears and requires 10 times the effort. A properly made spear point penetrates effectively. A poorly made one deflects. The difference between a master knapper's tools and yours is not merely aesthetic. It is functional. And the functional difference compounds across every task that requires a tool. The Paleolithic people who made beautiful, symmetric, finely worked tools were not making art, though the tools are genuinely beautiful. They were engineering. The symmetry and thinness of a well-made hand axe is not decorative. It is optimal for the specific mechanical tasks the tool was designed for. And arriving at that optimum required a technical knowledge and a practiced hand that took years to develop. Your tool is a rock with one edge. It will have to do. The second night is approaching, and you are better prepared than you were for the first. Not enough better. This is important to hold clearly, but better. You built your shelter earlier, which means it is slightly more substantial, which means the coverage is slightly better. You found water and boiled it this time, using a hot stone heating method that you remembered reading about, dropping fire-heated stones into a bark container of water until it reached a temperature that you hope was sufficient. You ate more. Some roots that you identified with reasonable confidence, more berries, a small fish that you caught in a shallow part of the stream with a patience and a makeshift spear that required 3 hours to produce 2 successful strikes. The fish was perhaps 300 calories, the roots perhaps 200, the berries perhaps 150. You are still running a significant daily deficit, but the deficit is smaller than yesterday. Your fire is real today. It took 4 hours and consumed more emotional energy than any task you have undertaken in your adult life. But you have fire. The bow drill method worked eventually. The key was the tinder bundle, which you rebuilt 3 times before the composition was right. And the moment the ember caught and you breathed it into flame in the tinder, and the flame was real and lasting, was one of the most purely satisfying moments of your existence. You understand, viscerally, in a way that no amount of reading could have produced, why fire was sacred to prehistoric people. The fire changes everything, not completely. The food problem and the blister problem and the infection problem and the knowledge problem are all still present. But the darkness is no longer total, and the cold is no longer absolute, and the sounds of the forest are no longer unmediated by anything between you and them. You sit by the fire. The Paleolithic night is vast around you. The fire is a small, fierce, completely reliable thing. You made it, and you understand in this moment what your ancestors understood every night of their lives, that this small circle of light and warmth in the enormous dark is everything. Not comfortable, not sufficient, not safe, but everything. The boundary between endurance and despair, the reason to make it to morning. The fire speaks in its low voice. You listen. The question you did not ask at the beginning, but which is the most important variable in whether you survive, is, what season is it? If it is late summer, August, September, you are in the best possible scenario. The food is at its most abundant. The nights are not yet cold enough to be dangerous. The days are long enough to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. The plants you can find and identify are at their peak. The water sources are lower but cleaner. The weather is manageable. In late summer, with fire, you might last a week before the accumulating deficits became critical. If it is spring, April, May, the scenario is more difficult. The winter stores are depleted. The new growth is just beginning. And the specific trap of spring starvation is real. The animals are lean after winter. The plants are young and small. The days are getting longer, but the nights are still cold. Spring is when prehistoric people were most vulnerable, when the gap between what was available and what was needed was at its widest. If it is winter, January, February, you are in serious trouble immediately. The food sources are at their minimum. The cold is at its maximum. The daylight is at its shortest, which means less time to accomplish everything that needs to be accomplished before the dark and cold of the night impose themselves. The animals have withdrawn from the easily traveled areas. The plants have retreated to their roots. A single unequipped modern person in a Paleolithic winter in Northern Europe alone, without prior preparation, has perhaps 2 to 4 days before the cascade of cold, starvation, and infection reaches a critical threshold. This is not pessimism. It is the arithmetic of what the body requires versus what is available. The Paleolithic people who survived winter did so because they had prepared extensively through summer and autumn, preserved food, cached supplies, maintained relationships within the group that ensured mutual support. Winter was survived by planning, not by improvisation. You arrived without a plan. What season is it? It matters more than anything else we have discussed. By the end of the second day, your body is being honest with you in a way that modern life rarely allows. Not through symptoms, though the symptoms are present, catalogued, running their courses, but through a fundamental quality of the physical experience that is different from anything the well-fed, well-housed modern body produces. The quality of alert exhaustion, the sharpening of some perceptions and the dulling of others, the specific mental clarity that mild starvation produces before it degrades into confusion. You are noticing things you would not have noticed yesterday, the exact angle of the light through the canopy and what it tells you about the direction of the afternoon sun, the sound of water, running water, somewhere to your left that you had not registered before, the particular behavior of a bird in a tree above you, that, if you knew what you were looking at, would tell you something about what is directly below it. Your body is running on a different operating system, not a better one. The modern operating system has many advantages, most of which involve not being hungry and not being cold, but a different one, more present, more attuned to the immediate physical reality of the environment, because the immediate physical reality of the environment is the only thing that matters right now. This is, if you are honest, something your ancestors felt every day of their lives and that you have never felt until now. The full engagement of the body and mind with the actual physical world. No mediation, no abstraction, just the direct experience of being an animal in an environment, reading it, responding to it, surviving in it. It is uncomfortable. It is also, and you would not have predicted this, vivid in a way that nothing in your normal life quite matches. The fire tonight will be brighter for this. The warmth of it will be more real. The morning, when it comes, will matter in a way that mornings usually do not. This is the trade. The Paleolithic world offers you almost nothing and takes almost everything. What it gives back is presence, full, undiluted, often frightening, occasionally extraordinary presence. Your ancestors lived there, all of them, every one of them, the entire chain of people whose accumulated survival produced you. They managed. You, in their world, for the limited time you could sustain it, are beginning to understand how. You follow the river. This is the most important decision you have made since arriving in the Paleolithic world, and it is the decision that the Paleolithic humans made consistently for the same reasons, across hundreds of thousands of years. The river is the highway. The river is the food source. The river is the navigation system. The river is the landmark that remains constant when everything else changes. Rivers in the Paleolithic world were rich in ways that are difficult to imagine from a modern river that has been managed, fished commercially, dammed, and run through agricultural land for millennia. The rivers of 30,000 years ago were full of fish, of the animals that came to drink, of the plant communities that grew in the rich alluvial soil of the banks, of the birds that nested and fed along the margins. You set a fish trap this morning, a simple construction of sticks in a shallow area that you remembered from a survival video, and that took 2 hours to build, and that you are not confident will work, but which requires no active attention once placed. You gathered watercress from the shallows, one of the few plants you can identify with absolute confidence, and which is actually edible and actually nutritious, containing vitamins and minerals that your increasingly depleted body needs. You found wild garlic, which you recognized by smell, and ate it raw while you were still processing its identity. The river has given you more food today than you found yesterday in several hours of more active searching. You follow it downstream because downstream generally leads toward lower, warmer, more open country with more diverse food sources, and because the river's direction tells you something about the lay of the land that is useful information for someone trying to make decisions in an unfamiliar landscape. Your fish trap catches 2 small fish by afternoon. You eat them immediately, barely cooked, and the protein hits your system with a clarity that you can feel. Not immediately, not like medication, but over the following hour, a stabilization, a settling, a slight reduction in the cognitive fuzziness that has been building since yesterday. Protein, water, fire. You have the basics. You are still not going to last a month. But tonight, by the river, with the fire and the fish and the watercress, you are going to be okay. One more night. Something is happening to you. Slowly, measurably, over the course of these days, you are becoming slightly more competent. Not Paleolithic human competent. That gap is enormous, and the time required to close it is years, not days, but measurably more capable than the person who arrived in this landscape cold and unprepared and lost. You can start fire now, not quickly, not reliably in bad conditions, but you can start fire. The procedural memory of the bow drill, the grip, the pressure, the cadence, is beginning to transfer from conscious instruction to something that feels more automatic. 3 days ago, it took 4 hours. Today, it took 40 minutes. In a month, if you were here, it would take 10. You can find water reliably. You know which direction to walk to find the river. You know the sound of running water at a distance. You know the plants that indicate moisture in the ground. You can read the forest slightly better. Not well. Not the way someone who has spent their life in this landscape reads it, but better than the first day, when it was undifferentiated trees and undergrowth. You are beginning to see the landscape as structured rather than random, beginning to notice the paths that animals have worn, the areas where the light reaches the ground and encourages the plants you can eat, the places where the terrain creates natural shelter. The education is happening, slowly, through direct experience, Through the feedback loop of trying things and observing what works, your body and mind are adjusting to this world. This is how it happened for your ancestors. Not through instruction, not through school, but through this. Direct engagement with the world responding, the adjustment happening in the body and the brain together. You are not going to make it in the long run. The deficits are still accumulating. The blister on your heel is warm in a way that is not good. The caloric deficit has made you weaker than you were yesterday. The immune system has been working hard, but you are learning, and the learning is real. The Paleolithic world is teaching you the thing it taught every human who has ever lived in it, that the world is comprehensible if you pay attention, that survival is learnable if you are willing to be a student, that the gap between helpless and adequate is bridgeable if the instruction comes with sufficient urgency. You have had sufficient urgency. You are paying attention. Tonight is clear. The cloud cover that has been a constant companion breaks in the late evening, and the sky that is revealed above the canopy of the Paleolithic forest is the sky that your ancestors saw every clear night of their lives. The sky before light pollution, the sky in its actual state. You lie by the fire and look at it, and the looking stops you entirely. The Milky Way is not a faint smear on the horizon, the way it is even in the darkest modern rural sky. It is a structure, a visible, three-dimensional structure spanning the entire sky, so bright that it casts a faint shadow, so dense that the individual stars within it blur together into something that looks like cloud or smoke, but has the specific quality of light that is not cloud or smoke. The stars that are individually visible are more numerous than the modern sky shows by an order of magnitude. The dark areas between them are genuinely dark, not the slightly less bright of a light-polluted night. You have never seen this before. No one alive today has seen this in its full form. The Paleolithic human saw this every clear night of their life, and the evidence suggests they looked at it seriously. The cave paintings that survive include astronomical observations. The placement of certain sites suggests astronomical alignment. The mythology of virtually every culture preserves the stories they told about the sky. The sky was not decoration, it was navigation, calendar, theology, and story all at once. You cannot navigate by the stars. You do not know the stories that belong to these constellations, the Paleolithic constellations, before the Greeks reorganized the sky into the patterns we inherited. But you can look. You look for a long time. The fire crackles beside you. The forest is quiet. The sky is doing what it does, which is to be vast and specific and completely indifferent to your presence, and simultaneously, in some way, you cannot name, connected to you, to the biology that produced eyes capable of seeing it, to the nervous system that produces the response you are having to it, to the millions of years of ancestors who lay by fires and looked at this same sky and felt the same untranslatable thing. You are cold and hungry and injured and alone and profoundly, completely alive. This is what the Paleolithic night gave you in exchange for everything else it took. The fire burns, the sky watches, you sleep. Let's be precise about the timeline. Day 1, blisters, dehydration if you did not manage water, caloric deficit, cold exposure if you did not manage shelter. None of these kill you on day 1. They set the conditions. Day 3 to 5, the giardia you contracted from the unboiled water begins producing symptoms: diarrhea, abdominal cramping, nausea. These symptoms cause dehydration and further impair your ability to process food. In your current state, this compounds significantly with the existing caloric deficit. Your immune system is now dealing with 2 fronts. Day 5 to 7, the blister infection, if it is progressing as the warmth suggests it is, begins to track up the lymphatic system. The lymph nodes in your groin become swollen and tender, which is the body accurately identifying that something is wrong. You are running a low fever, which is useful for fighting infection and costly in terms of energy expenditure. Day 7 to 10, the combination of giardia, blister infection, caloric deficit, and cold exposure has produced a state in which your immune system is significantly compromised, and you are significantly weaker than you were on day 1. A fall, a cut, a night of severe cold, a failed food day, any of these at this stage tips the balance. Day 10 to 14. Absent intervention, the most likely outcomes are sepsis from the blister infection, severe dehydration from the giardia symptoms, or hypothermia during a cold night when your body lacks the reserves to generate adequate heat. This is not a horror story. This is what the medical literature says happens to an unequipped modern person in these conditions. The Paleolithic human who was injured or ill without group support faced the same arithmetic. The difference was that the Paleolithic human in a functioning group had that support. You would have lasted with fire, with reasonable luck, and with the skills you were developing, approximately 2 weeks. Without fire, approximately 4 days. The title of this video is not quite right then. You would last more than a day if things went reasonably. You would not last a month, which is close enough. Before we end, spend a moment with this. The people who lived this life, not as a survival challenge, not as an experiment, but as the only life available to them, were not the half-animal primitives of outdated imagination. They were fully human, biologically, neurologically, cognitively identical to you. The same brain architecture, the same emotional range, the same capacity for abstract thought and language and social complexity and art. The cave paintings at Chauvet, made approximately 36,000 years ago, are not primitive scratching. They are sophisticated, deliberate, aesthetically complex works produced by people who understood perspective, who selected their subjects carefully, who used the contours of the cave walls as part of the composition. The person who painted the horses at Chauvet was an artist in exactly the sense that we use the word today. Someone with technical skill and aesthetic intention and something to say about the world. The flutes made from vulture bone found at Hohle Fels, approximately 35,000 years old, produce music, not noise, music. The person who carved them understood tonal relationships. The person who played them was playing to someone who listened. The burials that survive from this period, bodies placed carefully, with objects, with pigment, with what appears to be intention and grief, indicate that these people experienced the death of those they loved in ways that required ritual, required acknowledgement, required the specific human response to loss that we have not stopped performing in 30,000 years. They were not surviving in spite of being human. They were surviving because of it. The social bonds, the language, the planning, the art, the ritual. These were not extras added to a survival machine. They were the survival machine. The full complexity of human consciousness applied to the problem of living in the world. You are their direct descendant. Every piece of biology that kept them alive is in you. Every instinct that oriented them toward fire and shelter and community is in you. The capacity that produced the paintings and the flutes and the burials is in you. You just have not needed it in the same way until now. It is the third night. You are by the river, in a shelter that is better than the first one, with a fire that you started in 20 minutes, eating fish that your trap produced, drinking boiled water, your feet propped on a stone to reduce the swelling. You are going to be fine tonight. Not indefinitely. The timeline is the timeline. But tonight you are as close to adequate as you have been since arriving here, and the adequacy is yours. You built it, you learned it, you acquired it through the specific, uncomfortable, irreplaceable process of doing things that were necessary and failing at them and doing them again. Think about what you are taking back, not skills. You will lose the skills without the practice, the procedural memory, fading back into theory within weeks of returning to the world of central heating and supermarkets. But something else, something harder to name and harder to lose. The knowledge in your body rather than your head of what cold actually is. Not the abstraction of temperature, but the physical reality of cold working through inadequate covering over hours. The specific quality of shivering at 3 in the morning. The way the fire's warmth hits the cold, adapted body with a force that the merely comfortable body never registers. The knowledge of hunger in the same terms, not the mild hunger of a skipped meal, but the systemic, clarifying hunger of a body that has been running a deficit for days and has adjusted its priorities accordingly. The knowledge of darkness, real darkness, the Paleolithic dark that has no bottom, that the modern world has not been able to produce for over a century, and that your nervous system responded to with the full activation of ancient threat detection systems that you did not know you had. And the sky you saw on the clear night, the Milky Way in its actual state, the stars in their actual number. You will not forget that. It is in a different category from the other experiences, not survival information, not embodied knowledge of an environment, but something older, the response of human consciousness to the fact of the universe. Your ancestors saw that every clear night. You saw it once. It was enough to understand something about what they were, what you are. The fire is warm. The river sounds in the dark. The stars are out again tonight, through the gaps in the canopy. And you look at them for a while before the second sleep takes you. You would not last a month. But tonight, by this fire, in this ancient world, you have lasted. And the lasting has changed you in ways you will carry home and not quite be able to explain. The fire burns, you sleep.